And we will spend a lot more time on this paradigm.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate this sheet, the way he's laid it out, because he's kind of given two different models of how you put together a story. And I was actually not familiar with the top model, and so it's interesting to tie it in with the bottom one. The bottom model is he has 7 C's here, which, you know, every good sermon or presentation has a bunch of points that all start with the same letter. That's what they teach us when we're learning to sermonize. And it's got 7 or 8 or 9, just depending on which way you look at it exactly, different points. And this is really a model of how you put together a speech. And if you look at it, each one of the points, it kind of takes you through the speech from beginning to end. Or for the story, excuse me. It's not a speech, it's for a story. And this is super helpful for me. I mean, if you're in the same location I am, like you were saying, David, like, how do I find a story? How do I put it together? These points in this model is really helpful. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, because I think we're going to try to spend, in the weeks to come, we're going to try to spend time on these points to see how they apply. But they sort of start from the beginning. Curiosity. This is sort of the overriding point over the whole story. So what questions are in your audience's mind? It's not just, what's in it for me? That's one question, but that's not all there is. Audiences think about a lot more than that. And one of the points that overrides everything is you need to understand what's in your audience's mind as they're going through the story. And that's really the curiosity point of it. And the only way to do that, I'm afraid, is to record yourself and listen. Not to put too fine a point on it. The second point here is circumstance. This is what brings you in. I like Craig Valentine's acronym, TAP and transport, which is you tap into your audience's minds and their lives, and you bring them into your story. So a very common way is what I did at the beginning, which is, do you remember the first time you realized that adults don't know everything? That gets people thinking in their own minds what's going on in their lives, and then you can transport them into your story. So that's the general idea of circumstance. Characters are what we move into next. Characters, of course, are important or are vital in any kind of a story. And as we all have characters, but a lot of times, and in what little story writing I've done, I haven't really been intentional about my characters. What are your characters? What are your characters' goals? What are they like? What do they look like? You know, is she tall and lanky like Sister Thomas Marguerite, or a fire plug like Sister Alberta? Okay, what do they look like? What do they sound like? That sort of a thing. So, what are their desires? So, characters. Conflict. This is where as I think everybody, this is new to me because I don't know anything about stories, but I think probably everybody who knows stories knows the heart of the story is conflict. You need to have a conflict, or else you don't have a story. So, and this part is tough for me. I don't know, I was going through my story journal, or my story ideas this morning, and I have a lot of things happening, but there's no conflict in there. And my wife said, well, you don't like conflict. And I said, you're right. But if I'm going to figure out how to write stories, it's going to be, I got to find the conflict. And she actually helped me this morning with that story. It was actually different than the one I worked on
and it was wonderful.
In the class. Thank you. Yes.
Transition.
Thank you. So conflict. Build the conflict up and escalate it. How do you escalate the conflict? Not just jumping from the ground floor to the top of the Empire State Building, and it's not the airport moving walkway story, where you just keep moving forward, but you don't ever go anywhere.
Yeah, can I make a comment?
Please.
On his story, he had a couple of places with conflict, but where the escalation happened was he had been a dunce, and he was over in the corner, sitting there wondering what to do. And of course that creates some conflict in our mind of what's going to happen next. How is he going to get that dunce's cap off? And then he escalated it by saying, and then Sister Thomas Marguerite had Jane go over, and then Charlie went over, and then Harry went over, and he just kept building it up, and you kept seeing this line of kids over in the corner. I mean, that's not conflict like fighting, but it's conflict resolution in a sense. And so it's not that you always have to have conflict like we think of conflict,
Yeah.
but you have to have some dissonance. You have to have something that people are wondering how it's going to get resolved.
I think it also shows that you're not alone in that conflict either.
Right.
You weren't the only one that was having an issue.
Right.
And
Right.
that brings in sympathy as well.
Right. And we didn't talk about that, but certainly
Yeah.
that's, you always want to evoke emotions in your audience. You want to take them on an emotional roller coaster in your speeches.
I love it.
Well, just one thing you just said about that conflict and that
Right.
building that you did with putting the kids against the wall.
Mhm.
The other thing it does is it makes people think about, okay, what is this nun gonna do to resolve this?
Exactly.
Because she's building a pretty powerful group here, and like you said in your speech, she can't discipline half the class, so what's she gonna do?
Right.
That's right. At
So
some point,
that
they can
starts building
overpower her.
trust.
Exactly. I like that.
Yeah, that's good. Good observation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we build the conflict and it goes up. Finally, we get to the next C, which here is clarity. Craig has also used the words climax and cure. They're really all kind of the same idea. This is where the story is hitting the boiling point. And this is why the escalation is so important, because the audience has to be thinking, what's going to happen? How is this going to resolve? It can't go on like this forever. And so the clarity or cure, this is where you get your new understanding. For me, the cure was not actually standing up there. The cure was being at home with my parents.
Right.
And the guru, who I was actually originally thinking was going to be Sister Thomas Marguerite, as I thought about it a little bit more, the guru is my parents, my dad, who let me know that things are not the way I thought they were. He brought that new understanding to me, and that's what the clarity here is. One point that Paul points out here is the guru, which is so important. I mean, I've heard so many stories where the speaker is the guru. You know, then he said something to me, and I realized that this is what I had to do. But the problem is that puts the focus on you. And so that's why I love this idea of having a guru, having the person who really brought that clarity to your mind. Change, this is kind of after that cure scene. And I think this is something I struggle with too in a lot of stories, which is what changed? What's different? How did the characters change as a result of the conflict and the cure? And that's, I think, really important as far as selling your message, because as Paul said, the story needs to have a message. But if you don't change at all, it's kind of like, what's the point? You know, why should they buy that message? We were talking about that, I'm sorry, what's your name in the back?
Sean.
Sean, that's right, that's right. We were talking about that as we were leaving here last time, remember?
Yeah.
What changed in your life? That's really the change. That's showing you, you know, and that's selling the message, and it gives people resolution too. That's the other thing. You know, Paul, we're talking about questions. Well, what questions do the audience have in their mind? Did you answer them all? I realize as I'm standing up here, I didn't really necessarily answer all the questions. So it's a rough story. So we need to work out those questions. And finally, the carry away, which, you know, if you're just writing a story for story's sake, maybe you don't have a specific carry out. Maybe it's just, okay, well, that was a nice story. But that's, you know, at least for my purposes, I'm not a writer, unlike, you know, a lot of you. I'm not a writer. I need to have a specific carry-out message. What does the audience learn from this? And that's really the carry away. Like Paul said, the foundational phrase is a good way to put it. I don't have one for the speech I gave this morning yet. I got to work on that. But like in my contest speech, it was about personal safety and about being aware of your surroundings and paying attention to your intuition to keep you safe in various situations. And the foundational phrase, the carry-out, was your intuition is your ammunition. Something that really brings you in. And you know, remember in the contest, in the Division E contest, the speaker, she had this point, which was the alchemy of opposites. That was her point. That was her speech title. But one of my comments in my evaluation was, it's a great title, it's a great idea, but the only place I heard it was when the when you were introduced at the beginning and they were your last words in the speech.
Yeah.
It didn't really, you remember that?
Yes,
There wasn't anything there. It didn't really help the speech in a sense. It was just kind of there. And so tying in the carry out is huge to really bring the benefits to the audience. Hope it didn't take too long.
No, that was fine.
Very useful, thank you.